Welcome to Kansas City RealTalk, brought to you by KCHBA. I'm Alex Gehring. We recently heard the new podcast from the Home Builders Association of Greater Kansas City, HBA After Hours, and we knew we had to have the two hosts on Kansas City RealTalk. So let's talk about them really quickly. You know Will Reuter. We have had Will Reuter on the podcast before. He's also one of my favorite guests to have at my sales meeting. He is a phenomenal human being who is a great expert on new home construction and what the builder community experiences in Kansas City. He's got a lot of great information to share. And the last time we had him on the show was in December of 2021. So I want you to think about how much has changed since December of 2021 to this month of July, which is insane, by the way, July 2025. Unbelievable. I think he's probably going to have some new things to share with us. Keith Sauro is not only the co-host of the KCHBA podcast, but he is also an industry partner here with KCRR, representing the real estate book and new home guide of Greater Kansas City. You probably see him at events on a regular basis. He puts on some incredible events himself, but he also is a regular at KCRR events. So if you don't know Keith's name, you almost certainly recognize him. And I think that you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation. Let's go get Keith and Will. Will, Keith, welcome back to Kansas City RealTalk. Will, you've been on the podcast before. You're the president and CEO of the HBA. Keith, I don't think that we know you very well.
I've never met you. I've been working with KCRER for quite a while, but yeah, we might know each other just a little.
Maybe.
That's right.
You're with Design KC. I want to know more about you. Tell us about your journey and your partnership with KCRER and the HBA.
Yeah, so I published the real estate book and new home guide, so we have the only dedicated real estate magazine in the city, and then we launched Design KC, which is a luxury design magazine, and I've had the privilege of working with Kyla, and we just started working together now, and so we're happy to send the message out. Make sure when you're buying a home, use a realtor.
I love it. I love it. And Will, remind us.
Go back into the origin story, right? So I've been with the HBA just over 6 years. And obviously anybody that's been around housing over the last 6 years has known that anybody that thought they knew anything about housing pre-2019 doesn't know anything about housing today. So I feel like I kind of came into the industry at the same time as literally everyone else, even the people that have been doing it for decades. And so the HBA has been growing as an organization, and we've seen permits growing. We've seen diversification of product and price. It's been really cool to be at the helm of the organization at a time of such significant transition in the housing market. But, we're nothing if not optimistic, which we have to be. Otherwise, why get out of bed in the morning? So it's been a great run here at the HBA, and it's been, thrilling to start a podcast and have somebody of Keith's stature, which I know you guys have been in the same room
I got
before.
you all fooled.
I know you guys have been in the same room at some point, Alex, because Keith throws these monster housing-related design bashes all over the city.
I love
it. It's like the 7 degrees of like Kevin Bacon. What is that? Like, name an actor within 7 degrees. Know anybody in housing, you're probably going to get within 2 degrees of somebody that's been with Keith. So that's just the way it goes.
I'm like a fungus. You can't get rid of me.
Oh, man. I think that's the second time you've made a fungus reference in podcast together.
Okay. We don't like talking about microbial growth and fungi in real estate. We kind of skip that.
That was very serious. That's good.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, the housing market regarding new home construction right at the moment. What are builders experiencing right now? Anything new in the last year?
It has been, I think what most people are describing it as, a little bit softer of a market. It's not slow. It's certainly not gangbusters like it was during the pandemic. But by and large, there's a lot of homes that are going under contract, both those on the build side, pre-construction, as well as, prior to finish. We are seeing speculative inventory sit for a little bit longer, but all things considered, we're at permitting rates similar to around 2019, which, you recall 2018, 2019. That's when we had those, huge interest rates of, almost 5%, where someone was like, who's going to buy a house at almost 5%? And, now we're seeing similar sales volume. We're seeing similar construction volume. Things are still taking slower to build than they once did. We're still beholden to all of those, kind of 5 L's of housing supply: land, labor, lumber, lending, and laws. And so the confluence of those 5 things are contributing to the market today. It's, the will it or won't it tariff conversation that happens,
right,
which I think has gotten a lot of, would-be buyers kind of off the sideline. They're like, well, we need to go and get this done before, if these tariffs go into effect and we're not going to be able to get our appliances, or what's going to happen. So I think it has moved the needle a little bit in a positive direction by getting people off go. But it's a sign of, I think, cautious optimism out there in my conversations with members.
Yeah, prices continue to go up, obviously in resale and in new home construction, but particularly in new home construction, it seems. Are we seeing price increases as a result of cost increases primarily, or are we seeing an increase in demand for new home construction?
So I think I've tried to do a little bit better job of kind of piecemealing out what actually constitutes demand. There's a lot of people that need housing right now. Kansas City is a growing metro. Between 2010 and 2020, the Kansas City metro grew by 9% over that decade. And so we've got people moving in. We've got natural population growth, got a lot of good things happening at all points of the metro. And so the demand is there. It's the ability to pay, the ability to get into what it actually costs to acquire that property is the holdup. So people need housing. It's a little bit further out of reach. I saw a report over the weekend that of the top 50 metros nationwide, it is cheaper to rent a home than it is to buy a home. And that's a really kind of difficult place to be in. So the cost increases that we see in the prices of new home construction is directly related to the input costs. So everything is just more expensive. And in the anticipation of tariffs, we saw a lot of manufactured products that were put under contract already had some of those prices baked into it in anticipation of those. So whether or not the tariffs actually went into effect, those cost increases related to them have already started.
Got it. One of the things that I think is really interesting, we're seeing definitely a bump in the number of listings that are appearing in the $600,000 price point. I think a big part of that, it seemed like we were selling the 400,000 to 500,000 new home construction homes to first-time home buyers in a lot of instances, right? And I think that would still hold true, but because of cost increases, those same homes now, those same floor plans in those same neighborhoods are selling in the 600s, and that's a little bit more of a stretch for some of those consumers. Also, a lot of those floor plans have gotten smaller in order to maintain a certain level of affordability. So I guess what I'm curious about is, and this is really for both of you, given that environment, are we reaching a point where new and more innovative ways to build homes, design elements, et cetera, are we reaching a point where we're a little bit more ripe for innovation?
In the Kansas City market, we've always been a stick-built market, right? You just build it from the ground up with hammers and nails and a crew of people. And I think given the labor environment that exists and the difficulty of getting people into the skilled trades, that you do have some manufacturing elements that are starting to make its way into the market. And I always tell people that we don't build the same house today that we built 5 years ago, and we're not building the same house today we will be building in 5 years. There's constant innovation in the space. But it is going to take, I think, a greater effort in public awareness and education as to what the future of housing is going to look like. Things that may not have been tolerable to society a few years ago are going to have to, by necessity, be tolerable today and tomorrow.
I think what we've seen here in Kansas City was that, when you look at the coasts, whenever you were talking to someone at the coast that was in that 20-something, 30-something, what are you doing? I'm saving for a house.
Yeah.
I'm saving for a house, right? So a little bit of that price creep has happened in Kansas City. And then when you combine that with interest rates, which are not ridiculous, but people have to adjust to their new reality when they're used to hearing 3 and 4 and 5%, and now you're 6 and 7, they have to adjust to that new reality. But the bottom line is they have to live somewhere.
Right.
So you'll find that wherewithal that comes through for those folks, and they'll find a way. And that's we're seeing that happen, and we're seeing that shift.
Some of the communities around the metro are also recognizing the need to innovate from a regulatory standpoint. The modifying of their UDOs, their Unified Development Ordinances, to ensure that we're not just only building on 70-foot lots. Big houses on big lots. Because when you look at, national birth rates and the size of the average American family, the 5-bedroom home isn't looking demographically as necessary as maybe it once was. And so, we can't put inexpensive homes on really expensive big lots. So you got to shrink your lots. Your land cost is going to be a predictive factor of what that final price of a home is going to be. So smaller homes on smaller lots, and the market is screaming for that.
Even some builders that are doing things to turn homes around faster, since the inventory issue that we have, to turn homes faster, we're seeing homes on slabs that are going up quicker. They're not digging the basements, and it's able to get into that 300,000 and 400,000 range, which is that first-time home buyer, which didn't used to be, right? It used to be a couple 100,000.
That's right.
Now it's more 300,000 and 400,000. So we are seeing innovation in that way.
It's interesting. I keep on hearing about these. I think it's primarily in Texas right now. They're kind of 3D printing homes with concrete, and which I think, and given our climate and our environment, I don't know exactly how well that holds up over time. But you hear about these ideas, these smaller units that kind of took off in California. A lot of that doesn't necessarily make its way down here. And I think that maybe part of that is just because there hasn't been as much of a need for it, because relative to the rest of the country, we're much more affordable just in general. But I was kind of wondering about that, because I'm anticipating that at some point somebody's going to have an idea that's going to change the way homes might be built, not in a bad way, in a way that benefits all of us, in a way that benefits builders, in a way that benefits the consumer and expands housing availability for everybody. I just don't know what that looks like. And I fear that a lot of the things that would make that difficult are surrounding municipal codes and things like that. So are there changes recently on the municipal code front that our listeners should be aware of?
We've got a report that 23.8% of the overall price of a home is due to regulatory compliance, and most of that comes at the local level. Kansas and Missouri are 2 of only 6 states in the United States that don't have any statewide residential construction standards. So the HBA in Kansas City, we cover 69 different permitting jurisdictions, which means 69 different versions of the building code, development code, inspection regime, plan review, all of those things.
Busy man.
It's trench warfare. And so one of the things that we have certainly cautioned is that we've got to do a better job of assessing as communities what our wants versus our needs are. And the needs are prevalent. It is housing. It is more housing. It is more options to buy the housing that's being built. We're a home ownership organization. We want to build for families and sell them to families or individuals or whatever stage in life you're at. There should be a housing product that you can acquire within a reasonable price point. And so with every bit of regulation or requirement or compliance metric that comes into place, it does add time and it adds cost. And, we talk a lot about obviously what the interest rate is for mortgages. That's the thing that the consumers understand the most. But that same interest rate also exists on the construction side of things. So the longer it takes to build something and the longer it takes to sell something means that price is going to be that much higher because of what we call carrying costs for the life of that project. So, if a community does something that slows things way down or makes it really hard, not impossible, but makes it more difficult to learn your way through it, it's compounding the affordability crisis that we've got in the country.
And we've been in an environment where those carrying costs are passed on to the consumer. We could reach an environment sometime, I don't think we're anywhere near that at this point, but we could reach an environment where those carrying costs go the other direction and negatively impact the margins for builders as well.
Well, we saw that happen to some during COVID when it wasn't in their contract where they could raise the cost of lumber and so on. And as you know, at one point, what was plywood? Did it go to like $55 a sheet or some insane number? And it really stressed out some of the builders and their livelihood. But you figured it out, and I think consumers have even gotten to the point where they're almost used to this, right? And there's costs that are coming into play, and we're all dealing with it. And I deal with it in printing. I mean, paper went up for me. It has not come down like lumber has. Right. And it's never going to.
Yeah.
So I had to adjust to my new reality. So we're all living in that world.
One of the probably bigger regulatory threats, I'll call it a threat. I don't know if it's a threat or not, but I'll call it a threat or something to pay attention to that's going on metro-wide is the adoption of the 2024 code cycle. So the International Codes Council has put forward their 2024 code book. Most jurisdictions in the metro are on some version of the 2018. So it's usually every 6 years is they kind of skip a code year. And as we go into 2024 and looking through those books, there's a lot of added cost in there without any tangible benefit to the consumer. So, for whatever reason, the ICC, the International Codes Council, is just like any other private organization, they can be swayed one way or another. So if you've got product manufacturers or different elements that weigh in on that process and it makes its way into the code book, I think most people can be forgiven for thinking, hey, this is just a very independent, this is like a science book. This is A plus B equals C. And it has not been that way over the last couple of code cycles. And we've seen kind of a perversion of the model codes and ultimately what gets adopted locally. I think most of your listeners would recognize that Kansas City, Missouri adopted the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code, and to huge detrimental effects to their housing market. They saw a year-over-year 54% decrease in new starts in their community. And in 2023, there were 98 home builders that pulled single-family permits in Kansas City, Missouri. In 2024, that number was 22. So you saw a 78% reduction in the number of companies investing in housing within Kansas City, Missouri. So the stakes on adopting the wrong code are very high. And so as jurisdictions around Kansas City, in the Johnson County suburbs, in Cass County, Platte, Clay, everyone is looking at the 2024 code cycle without some kind of localization, without some amendment to take into account local environmental impacts and local demographics and average wage and utility costs, all of those things. We run the risk of just saying, hey, in order to achieve this higher level of energy efficiency, which everyone is for, no one's like, I want to build a house that leaks like a sieve and I can feel it breeze when I'm sitting on my couch
as much as I can.
That's nuts. But at what point are we saying, hey, we're going to build this to such a high standard that you're not going to be able to afford it.
Right.
And therefore, only the advantages of that energy efficiency only accrue to the people at the higher end of the income spectrum.
There you go. Yeah. I think that I'm curious what you think about how all of this is playing into design as well. So we're talking about eco-friendly provisions in these codes as well. I know that eco-friendliness also plays into design, right? So I'm curious if there are other ways that people can, without getting, if we all agree that the ineffectiveness of those codes, right, to actually improve the cost for the homeowner on their utilities or whatever, that's just ineffective. Are there things that the homeowner can do from a design perspective to still get those benefits from in a more cost-effective way? Am I making any sense there?
Yeah, I know. I mean, easy things like the kinds of shades that you have on a certain side of your house.
I was just going to say home automation, things like that.
There are relatively minor costs where you don't have to sacrifice on what the home looks like or how you experience it that will help you achieve a better level of performance within your home. I think one of the challenges of these new codes is that it's all behind the wall. And if you spend more money on the sticks and the bricks in order just to get the permit to comply with it, that is going to overtax or overburden the budget for the person moving into it. And therefore, they're not going to have the experience within that home that they would have otherwise wanted, whether or not it's a downgraded appliance package or a smaller space, or no, I can't finish my basement, and I was kind of relying on that for the family room or a home gym or something like that. So they have to make those trade-offs, but those trade-offs aren't their choice.
Right.
The trade-off is being forced upon them by these regulatory requirements because no permit, no home. So what do you want?
Kind of pulling away from eco-friendliness, I recently saw an article, and I want to say it was in the Business Journal, that was talking about how Johnson County was weighing I think the headline said Johnson County is weighing the legal risks of restricting tear-down build jobs. Have you guys seen that? Any comments on that practice? And how it benefits the community, or anything else you want to share?
Well, I'll ring in one point, and then I know you'll have another whole angle. Some of these homes that are in, and I know they're talking about some of the infill areas like Prairie Village and so on. Some of those homes are in such bad shape that the amount of money that it would take to rebuild is counterproductive. I mean, a lot of those homes, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, were built right after World War II.
Right.
On a budget, on certain ways to make sure we had housing for, everyone that came back from the war. And some of those homes they're kind of beyond repair. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you look at, prosperous cities build things. And if you're in a landlocked area, just follow development patterns. Northern Overland Park is like that. Prairie Village, certainly Westwood, Roland Park, all of those places that have, largely been built out, no opportunity for new neighborhoods. If they're going to improve their housing stock and be able to get people up to a modern sense of what housing looks like, because those prices are still high. Even if the home is, structurally sound, it's out of style. And somebody thinks, well, I'm still going to have to spend $400,000 on this thing and put another $150,000 in it to make it look like, doesn't belong in a museum. So I think there's that expectation that, we'll just fix everything and get it right back, and it'll stay $250,000. And that is just not the way that modern housing economics work. So, if you are looking at an ordinance or a regulation that is going to restrict or otherwise narrow the options that a consumer has, or narrow the options that a builder has, or say we as a community are not going to allow X, Y, and Z type housing, the opportunities for you to get all of the other kinds of housing are also narrowed. And so when you're overly prescriptive about what you're willing to allow within your community, we should be in a posture of saying yes to housing. Whatever kind of housing somebody wants to bring to this community, it's going to be a good thing. Now, it needs to be a mix. It needs to be, diverse in not only product but also price. But if you're saying no to certain kinds of housing, you're essentially saying no to any kind of housing. Some people are okay with that, but most people are not once they get their property tax bills.
Sure.
Because, communities have a choice. Do we lower the services that people have told us that we want? They like their snow, taken off the streets after snow. They like their trash picked up. They like potholes filled in. So if you're not going to reduce the number of services, then you either need to raise taxes or you need to create more taxpayers. So more housing, it lessens the burden across the spectrum. So I think communities can fall into a trap by listening to some of the voices within the community that maybe have an outdated understanding of what modern housing economics are today. But I would certainly caution against saying no to any kind of housing. We need to make housing legal again and get these things built.
Yeah. What was the reason that when you were reading that, what are some of the reasons that they were stating why they were going to potentially start restricting in neighborhoods? Because that's not something I'd really heard.
I think some of it gets back to some of the issues that they were having early on. And I think that some of these are still problematic. But you have the water routing, flood water routing, and how that can impact neighboring homes.
Sure.
Also, just the general increase in price and pressure and everything else within a neighborhood. But I think, sometimes articles like, we all know that, especially in our industry right now, sometimes articles like that get thrown around, and who knows what the world, Johnson County is actually thinking.
Right. Yeah, right. Well, and that is the most politically difficult kind of development to do. It's also the most expensive. And so, there are some builders that just try to cater to that market because they've kind of figured out how to be less disruptive within the neighborhood. They know how to work with the neighbors, all of those kinds of things. But, perception is reality when it comes to housing. And all of a sudden you hear the pitchforks getting sharpened and the torches are being lit. And there's not a lot of people that are willing to go through all of that headache in order to make that kind of housing happen. And so I think it comes down to communication and education. Housing is such an intimate thing in that we all have a housing experience in our lives.
Sure.
Either whether you're a renter or you're an owner, whether you grew up poor or rich or whatever, we all have housing baggage when we're looking at the housing market. And we've got a habit of projecting our own personal bias onto everyone else's experience.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily a fair thing to do, especially for Gen Z and some of these younger generations that are just like, I don't care about any of this. I just want a place to live.
There you go.
I mean, MarketWatch did a survey at the tail end of the 2024 election cycle that showed within Gen Z, the emerging home buying cohort that everyone's kind of chomping at the bit to sell to, it said that housing costs, housing affordability is the top voting issue for that cohort of young people across the country, and it superseded climate change for the first time in 20 years.
Wow.
So this is not only something that we feel every day, and market participants understand housing and the pressures that exist, but it is also becoming a political issue. And so for those local and state and even federal officials to ignore this rapid deterioration in housing affordability maybe comes at their own political peril because people are clamoring for an opportunity to change their housing circumstances.
On that topic, as housing becomes more and more political, and knowing that none of us are like currently running for political office or anything, and nobody's going to be too mad.
I wouldn't put that on the air. That's not going to happen.
But I'm curious. You listed off some of the municipalities in Johnson County. Merriam, Westwood Hills. How many? We've got like 19 municipalities in Johnson County, right? And as housing becomes more and more of a political issue, we have a lot of city councils that we have to advocate to, right? And does our municipal structure and kind of that pork barrel fat in a way of having so many different municipalities and so many different governments to cater to, does that make our job? I feel like it makes our job quite a bit harder.
Definitely harder. I mean, I'll let you take that. I mean, you are literally constantly watching and reading and trying to protect the homeowner, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's no builders without buyers, and there's no buyers without builders. So, to to answer your question, Alex, absolutely. It makes it so much more challenging because to achieve the economies of scope and scale in today's housing environment, you have to be able to do business in multiple jurisdictions. You can't just go, well, I'm only going to build in Olathe, or I'm only going to build in Overland Park, or I'm only going to build in Lee Summit. You can't do that anymore. You've got to go where the lots are. And, we're at a 25-year low in lot inventory, places to actually build on. So we've got, diminishing opportunities. And if we don't have communities that are all rowing in the same direction, in the right direction, they can also all row together in a bad direction. So we want to prevent that. But it does create significant challenges. And I do think that, the complexity of housing and how homes are built and all of the requirements associated with them, it is almost unfair to ask a part-time legislature in the form of a city council or a board of aldermen to be able to reasonably understand what it is that what they're advocating for or what they're passing. No one can be expected to understand all of those different things. That's why they have, a building official on staff to go through all those things. And so if we have essentially housing as a math problem, and if you run a math problem through a calculator, you're going to get the right answer. But if you run a math problem through a political process, who knows what that's going to spit out? And that's what we've been seeing a lot of around the metro and around the country, frankly.
Yeah, I can only imagine all these different city councils with different points of view on the matter, and some of them more informed than others, some of them dealing with larger populations than others and different demographics that are impacted by different things. It just seems really, really difficult to navigate. And for people like you that do that level of lobbying and advocacy work, that's very difficult in our environment. I imagine that it's difficult everywhere,
right.
But it seems particularly difficult as the thing that we're lobbying and advocating for becomes more and more political.
Yeah, so not only do we not have any statewide construction standards, we've got 2 different states.
Right.
So read a headline nationally about housing, you'd be like, oh, that's interesting. It just doesn't apply one for one in Kansas City. We're our own thing. And so that's why we really have to dig into these things at the local level to figure out what works for the Kansas City metro. And you know what? What's going to work in Olathe is not going to work in Parkville.
Right.
Maybe. So, we need to figure out, hey, what works down there for this community and what's going to help us all? Because we need more housing, and we need 360 degrees of housing all over the metro.
And it's really groups like the HBA that will lobby and add that big picture thinking that maybe they're not thinking about when they're from whatever agenda was presented as to what that goal was for that particular rule or rule change or law change or code change. Somebody has to present that over and over to this group.
Absolutely.
To your point, these are part-time people. They might jump on that bandwagon but not have that final big picture thinking. And you got to watch each step, every step, because one step can turn into another bad step and then another bad step, and then all of a sudden you're in big trouble, like what happened in Kansas City, Missouri. I mean, we have a housing problem. We need more lots purchased and built on, not less permits.
Right. And KCRAR has always been such a great partner with the HBA. In my 6 years here, I would send a note over to staff, and there would always be, 8 or 10 people that would show up and help us tell this housing story. That's amazing. There are more opportunities for members of KCRAR and the realtor community to come out and say, you know what, if inventory isn't just going to materialize, we have to go out and create some more. Yeah. So let's get in with the HBA and let's go make some more housing happen.
Both of you kind of commented on lot availability. So here's what I'm seeing. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this and if you agree. It seems like there are plenty of lots that are out there, and there's plenty of construction happening, but a lot of it is in single builder developments where the developer is the builder, and a lot of it's more regional than local, which is Will, you and I have talked about this before. This is a fairly new trend in Kansas City, and it's very different. But a lot of these guys that used to do large scale developments are starting to retire. right? And
we're seeing a changing of the guard. Definitely.
We're seeing a changing of the guard, and we're in a situation where some of these guys that maybe are inheriting that business who were raised in the business, right? They don't necessarily want to get into development, and they're more interested in some of the tear down projects that we were talking about before. As that change happens, if the trend continues, is that a positive thing for inventory levels? Is it a positive thing for the consumer? We just said that any housing creation is positive, right? For people that are looking at that change and wondering what that looks like in the long term, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, so when you look at the way that development patterns have existed over the decades within Kansas City, within the metro, you start in the core and it just goes out. And Kansas City has almost been like a perfect ripple in the sense that you drop the stone in and there's symmetry that exists on both sides. And that's kind of changed a little bit now. When you look at some of the available land, if you just would follow those development patterns and say, okay, across that road, across 199th or across 179th or across College Boulevard, wherever you are in the metro, that's next. And then you get in, you do the land survey, you do the topography, and you're just like, we're not going to be able to build much of anything on this because it's so much rock, or you're close to mine. There's mining activity, and
right.
all of those things. And the old kind of rinse and repeat thing that we got used to from a development standpoint is not going to be available to us, frankly. And so we talked a little bit earlier about innovation in the vertical construction in the building space. Innovation on the land development side is going to become, even more important because you can't build anything unless you've got the land to build it on. Right. And so, we've seen changes in the financing mechanisms for land development. There are fewer traditional lenders that are doing residential development loans. People that have done it for decades here in the metro are just saying, that's not really for us anymore. Those wounds of 08, 09, 2010, those are not scabs. Those are still open wounds that people actively remember. And not only on the building and development side, but also on the lending side. I mean, everyone remembers that period in time. It was a long time ago, but it was just yesterday for a lot of this. And so ours is an industry that never truly recovered from that event. And so as we look at development in the 21st century in the Kansas City metro, what pieces are we going to have to put in place to make that kind of stuff happen? Now, the state has stepped in, state of Kansas, recently in expanding what used to be called the Rural Housing Investment District, RHID. Now it's reinvesting in housing. And so there are now communities that are exploring the use of that. I saw the Overland Park City Council had a proposal made to them, and there's some up in Edwardsville. And so I think the state, to some degree, is recognizing, hey, there's a role to play in some of this. If you look at the Kansas and Missouri's neighbors around us, they're probably a decade further along in some of that gap financing in order to bring in workforce housing, not large-scale apartment complexes, but smaller-scale single-family, maybe single-family attached. And Nebraska, Oklahoma, they're doing more than we are. And so if the reliance is, hey, just this is all going to be privately financed and it's all going to be the local developer that does it all, then we're not going to get the same outcomes that some of those other places have, simply because the project no longer pencils.
Absolutely. So Spring Hill had an RHID project that they went through that process about 2 years ago, and I went to the meetings on that. And with that process, the city has to approve it, but so does the school board, and so does the county, right? So all three of them have to approve it. And I specifically went to the school board meeting, which was also the most contentious, which is crazy to me. But you're at the school board meeting, and you have these people that are so concerned about whether or not the consumer, the end consumer, is really going to realize the benefit, right? Or if these lots are just going to be the same cost as everything else. I think what a lot of people fail to realize is that a lot of these developers, whether we like it or not, they need a certain amount of incentive to get into the game to begin with.
Sure.
I think we are seeing consumers benefit from those lower costs to the developer, but the developer does need a little bit of a benefit to do it. Otherwise, you start pricing out all of these mom and pop developers, and which, you know, I'm all for capitalism, but I'm all for people being able to make a living and be able to participate. And there's something to be said for local leadership in these developments where people really believe in and care about the communities. Their kids go to school there.
Yeah. You know, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
So these what I'm seeing are really great builders that have been doing this for a long time that need more places to build. And they're all of a sudden seeing these lots of land, and they have the big picture thinking, not to overuse that term, to see, I can do this myself. The B.L. Rickeys and the Jason Walkers and the folks like this, just to name a couple. There's many that are doing this. Matt Adam Development, he's been doing this for years, right? But we don't have any huge tract builders, right? Our entire community, how many builders now, would you say?
We've got, around 330 LLCs probably pull single-family permits.
So you think about that, and the average builder is what, 8 homes, 12 homes, somewhere around there? So we're seeing these very smart people that have grown up in the business, watched it, they've purchased the lots, they've been on the other, they see it, that are doing it on their own. I say thank goodness, right? Because without some of these new developments that are coming in, we'd really be in trouble, right? Of course. And you still, of course, have the Rod Rocks and the folks like that have been very, very successful in developing. But guess what? They're all local.
Right.
I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if we're missing anything.
You know, it just like anything, it's a two-sided coin. But you know, I think that what that has resulted in for the consumer around the metro is that they get more for their dollar than anywhere else in the country. And the level of competition that has occurred, a very fragmented contractor space in Kansas City. What that's meant is that a home that is purchased here in Kansas City, dollar for dollar, is of higher quality and lower cost than what you would get in another market of similar stature of the Kansas City metro.
Which I think is why some of the nationals can't make it here.
Well, there's
structure.
We're spoiled.
Right.
There's an expectation that exists here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to pivot to a different discussion really quick. The builder and realtor relationship, right? And Will, you and I have talked a lot about this in the past as well. There were a lot of people that were just convinced that the builder and realtor relationship was going to change in a large way about a year ago, right? I'm curious from your perspective, what does that builder and realtor relationship look like today, and is it still strong?
Well, let's talk about the parade of homes. And let's talk about how the realtors and the builders partner together on that. I mean, that to me, you're talking about a lot of hours that these realtors are, and they might moan a little bit, right? Hey, it's going to be some long time, long hours, but it's invaluable for them to be in that lot, right? Or sitting at that property as these massive amounts of homeowners. You know, we have the strongest, parade of homes. Kudos to the HBA, one of the strongest parade of homes in Kansas City.
Oh, wow.
That relationship just continues to get stronger and stronger, in my opinion. Now, I think all business owners worry about cost, right? They're all going to take a step back and say, I have to pay these commissions, I have to do this. Oh my gosh, but I'm doing so much. And maybe they work it out, however that is. But I don't know of a builder out there that doesn't say, without the realtor, we're in trouble.
No, I think that's right, Keith, in the sense that, that was an incredibly disruptive time period, right? Where everyone was like, what in the world is this even going to mean?
New contracts, new forms, new processes.
Different disclosures, all of those things. Not a total reset of the relationship by any means, but I think reconfiguration or reimagining of it. I think what we've seen out in the market as it's played out in real time is that, yes, certain elements have changed, but the the core of the business is exactly the same. We're going to get this thing built, bring me a buyer, hand them off, go get another one. Let's go. Keep the line moving, right? And I think that given the amount of noise in the space, I mean, how many startups are there now with, advertising new home listings, and you've got the Zillow dynamic that exists and some of that the turmoil that exists all over there. But it's one of those things where housing is all still very local and it's still so relationship based. It's the largest transaction any one of us are ever going to make, and very few of us make it more than a half a dozen times in our lives. In fact, I would say that given the lock-in effect, there's going to be even fewer transactions that you make in your life. And so how do we find that right buyer at the right time within the right product that's being produced? And that's going to have to be, that ongoing relationship. And I think that there's such tremendous opportunity that exists because the buyers of yesterday are not going to be the buyers of tomorrow. So how is the entire industry going to adapt with one another? And that consumer interface, that relationship, that level of trust that gets developed between the buyer and their representative and the buyer and their builder, and the three of them sitting around trying to figure out, how do we make this happen? I don't think there's a one-for-one replacement for that. There's certainly not an AI element that is going to insert itself in there and get everything completely taken care of. So I think the value is still there. The importance of that relationship is absolutely still there. It's strong, and when markets go through transitions like we're going through now, and who knows what. The reconciliation bill that just made its way through the Congress last week. Who knows what that impact is going to have on home ownership? I mean, raising the SALT cap, from 10 to 40. What implications does that have for housing? Where's it going to go? All of those things are going to have to get figured out together, because there isn't any one element of the housing industry that has a monopoly on all of the information in order to make informed decisions.
Absolutely. It seems like anybody that thinks that they know the answer on how that's going to impact housing, they're probably pretty full of it. Anytime somebody makes a prediction based on that, you never really know how much how right they might be.
Right.
Yeah, they're going
to story being told.
They're going to come in hot, and they're probably going to flame out.
They've got an angle.
Right. Know-it-alls that don't know anything tend to not stick around very long.
Well, you mentioned AI, Keith. I'm curious. So from a marketing standpoint, we've talked a lot about new home construction, and I know that you're really in the marketing business, effectively, right? So thinking about marketing and artificial intelligence, what are some things that you're seeing? What are you expecting that part of the business to look like in the next 5 years, which is kind of a long time, actually. 2 years might be more realistic. So in the next 2 years, where do you think marketing in real estate and new home construction, et cetera, will be?
Well, when it comes to the one-on-one, you can see more artificial intelligence calls coming through. We're already seeing them now, right? People that are calling to maybe try to get you to sell your home or things like that. The funny thing is, we live in a digital world. And here I am with 2 print publications. And some people might say, you need to have your head examined. What are you doing? Do people actually even use this stuff? And the fact of the matter, you can add so many different things into the mix. There's constant things that are coming out. There's more and more digital marketing that we're seeing day in, day out. But at the real end of the day, consumers are tired of being on their devices all the time. And we're fortunate that they will use our products as a personal getaway, right? On the AI side, we are seeing some things with design that come through. We've seen people using AI to create different sinks. Thompson Traders came out with this beautiful sink that Leslie Carruthers actually created that was done using AI technology to get it created. And then, of course, they manufacture it. So I think we're going to see more AI in that space.
A sink.
Too.
Tell me more about
sink.
that.
You have to look at it. It was actually just using
Yeah.
just a description, taking a description of what they wanted, coming up with a complete design, and then actually manufacturing that sink based on using AI technology to get it's crazy,
Wow.
right? You're just seeing lots of things. It's kind of no different than, well, I guess it is a little bit different when you're seeing these 3D printers and some of the things that are happening with that, right?
Sure.
That they can actually create it. So who knows where it's all going to end up? But at the end of the day, if you're producing something to inspire, I think there'll always be space.
We did on our podcast, HBA After Hours, we did an episode on fraud prevention, which I know that KCRER and realtor communities do a tremendous amount of continuing education on. And I think that's probably one of the biggest threats is someone misplacing their trust in a non-person.
Absolutely.
You've got to have that human judgment and that empathy in order to really form the bond that you're just like, okay, I'm going to wire this money because I can look this person in the eye, or I'm going to take that check in and slide it across the table to an actual person because everybody gets busy. Everybody wants convenience. That's understandable. That's human nature. But I think AI, as much benefit as it will, probably have for society, it comes with a related set of vulnerabilities, and we just have to keep our head on a swivel and make sure we're having conversations like this and partnering with organizations like this to continue beating the drum. Because what we don't want is that American dream to get shattered because of that misplaced trust.
Human interaction, I don't think can ever completely be replaced, but of course, using AI, there's some things that we can do, to help us get to different spaces faster. We'll use it sometimes in the editing process just to have it comb through. But you know what? It's not perfect because it's grammar's one thing and thrust is another.
Yes.
So it can't replace the thrust. So it's going to be interesting to see where this helps and where it hurts over time.
Yeah, you want it to supplement rather than supplant.
Correct.
Well, guys, I have to finish up with Bobby Howe's favorite question. What else? What do we not talk about today that we should have?
Well, I just mentioned it a minute ago. The HBA does have a podcast,
All right.
HBA After Hours. Go to kchba.org/podcast. We're free agents when it comes to topics. We want to talk about the things that other people want to hear about. We'll bring in the experts. There isn't an organization in Kansas City that has access to all of the thought leaders when it comes to new home construction as our organization does. And so would certainly invite people to tune into that. We've got a couple of seasons that are out there on wherever you get your podcasts. And we're always also looking to crowdsource this a little bit from a topic standpoint. So bring us your best ideas. Keith and I am always the dumbest person in the room. And so we want to bring in the smart people so that we can ask our silly questions and at the end of the day, have a great discussion and hopefully equip somebody with one more piece of this housing puzzle that they didn't have before they started listening.
Right.
And who's the audience for the podcast? Is it primarily for realtors or just anybody that's interested in the space?
Trade professionals, and people in the industry as well alike, right? I mean, it's kind of like with Design KC and our publications. I mean, we're reaching the trade and we're reaching the consumer and making that connection. That's really the goal, I would say, of HBA After Hours is how do we get the information out there both to the consumer and to the trade to educate and connect and make things happen in the building industry.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it takes about 150 different skill sets to bring a new home to market. And so we want to bring in all of those different elements. So even people that have been in the industry for 30 years that didn't ever quite know how that part worked. Hey, now I got a little bit more information. That's great. I'm a more rounded individual. And the same with consumers. We want to beat down on some of those psychological barriers that exist, saying, I could never build a house. That's going to be way too labor intensive. Or I can't even remodel my kitchen because remodeling is just this foregone thing that I'm never going to be able to fully wrap my mind around. It's like, no, you can ask these questions, and here's who you should be asking these questions. Here's how you should be asking them, and have the courage to pick up the phone. There's a lot of people on the other end of the line that want to visit with you and get you where you want to be.
I love it. Well, I will definitely be tuning in. And Keith, I have to give you really quick, Design KC magazine.
Oh.
When I started getting these things, That is a high quality publication, man. It really is.
I
It's
appreciate
beautiful. That is a gorgeous
Yeah.
magazine. Just the way that it feels in your hands. And I mean, I flipped through every issue.
Thanks.
So truly, it's a.
I give kudos to Andrea Dar, my editor in chief, and Ryan Litz, my designer. They're the dynamic duo, if you will. But we wanted to create something that was so high quality it's really hard to put in the recycle bin. And in our industry, the coffee table book term is just thrown around like crazy. And I really think we accomplished that with that product. So
it's one of the. I only allow a couple of them to sit on the ottoman that's in my office, and that's one of them because it actually looks and feels like I want it to. So
thanks very much. I appreciate that a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, guys.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Alex.